Okay, here we want to go ahead and continue to factor. You'll notice here we have four terms, so we can consider factoring by grouping. But even with grouping, you want to go ahead and do your greatest common factor. But in this case, there is no greatest common factor. So we're going to just try grouping the first two and grouping the last two. Well, what can we pull out of the first two? They would both have an x cubed. We could pull that out. What would that leave us with in the parentheses? Well, an x cubed times an x gives us our x to the fourth. And an x cubed times a negative 3 gives us this. So we'd have that. Well, what are we going to pull out of here? We're going to pull out an 8 because that's our greatest common factor out of the last pair. Pull your 8 out, leaves you with an 8 times an x to give you your 8x, and an 8 times a negative 3 to give you your negative 24. You'll notice, once again, we have our parentheses being the same. That's good because that's our common factor we want to go ahead and pull out. We pull out that common factor of our parenthesis. That's gone, so it leaves us with an x cubed. Plus, that's gone, leaves us with our 8. But we're not done factoring here because you'll notice the blue is really your sum of cubes. Because it's really an x cubed plus a 2 cubed. So the blue part's going to factor farther yet. So we're still going to have our x minus 3 hanging around the front. Now you're going to go to your sum of cubes formula, replace all your a's with an x, all your b's with your 2. When you do that, you will get something like this. Well, that's going to factor just, or simplify just a little bit because your 2 squared is really just a 4. Well, we're going to go ahead and try to factor this here. There's no greatest common factor, but you always want to check for that. There may be. Since there's 3 terms, you want to do 2 parentheses side by side. Now, in this case, you need to think, what are all my options to get an 8? What are all my options to get a 27? So here we have our options to get an 8. Notice this is an 8 here. It's just your imagination that it doesn't say 8. And so we got to figure out which one of these options works in front. Here's our options give us 27. Which one of these options work in the back to give us our negative 27? Well, after some trial and error, you'll realize that you're going to get this. Now notice, this 19 right here is not necessarily small compared to your 8 and 27. So therefore, we can say, well, since that's not small, we can use the pair that's farther apart. And in this case, that works. That rule that I was talking about, using, if this is small, use the pair that's close together, or if this is not small, use the pair that's farther apart, works about 95% of the time. Well, we have this factored, but you notice the first part here is really differences of cubes, because 1 is really a 1 cubed. The second part here is also sum of cubes. Now, sum of cubes, you might say, well, I can see that 27 is something cubed, which it is. It's a 3 cubed, and this is really a 2c that's being cubed here in the front. So, for the differences of cubes here in the front, you're going to replace all your a's in your difference of cubes formulas with a c, all your b's in your differences of cubes formula with a 1. When you look at your sum of cubes formula, you're going to replace all your a's with a 2c, all your b's with a 3. Now we can do just a little bit of simplification. Your 1 squared, that simplifies. Here we can apply the squared to each one. Your 2 times 3 is 6, your 3 squared is 9.